Hello again.
Welcome to Priest and Rabbi Walk into a Bar. We're still not at a bar. We do have some mocktails, cucumber melon mojito mocktails, which are delicious.
It's true.
Cheers.
Cheers.
But we did actually do an in-person event, an Interfaith Happy Hour, a few weeks ago, and we have one coming up on July 13th for anyone in the Denver metro area. We'd love to have you come. And one of the things that we did at the last event was Mother Megan prepared some slips for anyone who wanted to ask an anonymous question. So, one of the questions, which gets into so many more questions, was how do you think or talk about the New Testament? And on the bottom of the questions, it said, who would you like to answer? And there were check boxes, Rabbi Amanda or Mother Megan or both. So it's checked for me, but I actually think I have so many questions to throw back. So I actually think we should start with like what exactly is the New Testament?
Okay. The New Testament is a series of books written by Christians, as you might imagine. There's four Gospels: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, which are more narrative descriptions of Jesus's life, death, and teachings and resurrection. So it's much more of it feels more like a novel, the Gospels do. Then there's a bunch of epistles, which are letters written by early Christians, mostly Paul. Paul is the big author in the New Testament, written to churches that he founded that were struggling with different issues. So he wrote guidance for them theologically. And then there's some other like sort of one-off epistles from some other people. And then there's Acts as well. I forgot to talk about Acts. Acts is it's a companion to the Gospel of Luke. So the Gospel of Luke talks about Jesus and the disciples, and then Acts, which is in a similar style, same author as Luke, talks about the apostles in the early church. So it's their story and how it mirrors Jesus's own story. So the Gospels, Acts, the epistles, and then the one that everybody thinks about is Revelation, which is specifically in apocalyptic literature, much in the same tradition as Daniel and some of the other apocalyptic Jewish literature. That a lot of people have things that talks about the end times, and it's not super clear if that's true. Just know that any sort of Left Behind series apocalypse idea that has happened in the last that you might be familiar with is actually very recent Christian thought in only the last 150 years. So anyway, Gospel, Acts, epistles, all wraps up the New Testament.
Okay. And one thing that I learned this year through coming to St. Tim's is that you all, meaning like the Episcopal Church, has a annual cycle of, or is it a triennial?
Triennial.
Okay, cycle of reading. So you make it through everything in the New Testament?
No.
Okay.
No, it's just selections.
Okay.
So we use the Revised Common Lectionary. Not every Episcopal church uses the Revised Common Lectionary. Most do, and a lot of other Christian denominations also use the Revised Common Lectionary. It's very similar to the Catholic one, similar to the Lutheran, Presbyterian, Methodist, all of those folks that use that. So it's a calendar of readings. So we have a scripture from the Hebrew Scriptures, a psalm, one of the other books in the New Testament that's not a gospel, and then a gospel reading for each week. And that's on a 3-year cycle that gets through a lot of the New Testament, but the editors are very careful to leave certain things out. And that's a big criticism of the Revised Common Lectionary, is that it leaves a lot of things out and has its own kind of view. So some people don't do that in favor of sort of preacher's choice.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, so in Judaism we have something similar where we have assigned Torah readings for every Shabbat and holiday of the year, and some synagogues use a triennial cycle where they read a third of the Torah portion each week, and over the course of 3 years you make it through everything that's in the Torah. Or some communities read the entire Torah portion each week, and then you make it through everything that's in the Torah in 1 year.
Wow.
So the triennial makes the Torah reading shorter. But in theory, any synagogue you go into on the same date, no matter where it is in the world, would be reading the same thing.
Yeah, and that's very much the same idea around the Revised Common Lectionary is like, especially in the mid 20th century when a lot of Christian denominations were being formed and Vatican II was happening and all these reforms were coming around. It was, my understanding, a way to have some unity in this. But the way that our 3 years are organized is much more focused around three of the four gospels. So year A is going to have a Matthew focus. Year B is going to have a Luke focus. Year C is going to have a Mark focus. And then John is kind of like shoehorned in there at different times. So it's more of a themed thing than trying to read all of Scripture.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, so how do I think of the New Testament? So, one important thing to share is Mother Megan has a visual for us, which is so much of what is in, if you were to find a Bible in a hotel room drawer, so much of what's in here is a shared text that is sacred to Judaism and Christianity. So this chunk right here is what Christians would call the Old Testament, which Jews call either Hebrew scriptures or Tanakh, which is an acronym for Torah, Nevi'im, Ketuvim, or Torah, prophets, writings. And then this chunk right here is what Mother Megan was just describing of the Gospels and the Epistle. And then this part right here is really interesting. This is material from kind of this same time period-ish that wasn't actually included in either of our official sacred texts. It's called Apocrypha, but we both of our traditions hold on to it. So in this section, for example, is the Book of Maccabees, which is where we get part of the Hanukkah story, but it technically isn't actually in the section of the Hebrew scriptures. So in Judaism, we don't read the New Testament because that falls outside of our canon. But getting at the question of like, since so much of the New Testament is about Jesus, if the question is, how do I see Jesus? I imagine Jesus as like, Jesus was a Jew. I think, would all Christians agree that?
Yes.
Okay, so Jesus was a Jew. I imagine him being a very sacred teacher, perhaps having some miraculous healing abilities. We in the Talmud read about other leaders with that at the time. So far mine have not yet come in. I don't know about yours. But there was a lot of sectarianism at this time. The time in which Christianity emerged was a period in which change was happening. And I see Christianity as one of those breaks away from Judaism that initially wasn't necessarily that way, but over time became its own religion.